What is up, guys? My name is Lex. Today we're playing a 5-10 session at Hard Rock in Hollywood, Florida. But first, we're gonna hit the gym. I'm gonna do something a little different and take you guys there with me. Hope you guys enjoy seeing that. Then we're gonna come back, get ready, head up to play some poker. All right, let's go. Alright guys, so about a week ago, the poker room staff came up to me and said they saw some of my videos, and I'm actually not allowed to film or record at the table, can't video record, so that's a little unfortunate. We are in contact with the poker room marketing manager, hoping to get a vlogger pass just like Brad Owen and Johnny Vibes do here, so hopefully we can work something like that out. The poker room staff is super professional, so I don't blame them for doing their job, nothing wrong with that. Hopefully we can work something out, but until then, I'm going to be going over hands just like this or using pictures, so hopefully you guys like that as well. All right, enough talk. We're going to play some poker now. Let's go. Alrighty, you guys came here for the poker, so that is what we're going to get into right now. Starting off, we are at the must move game. It's okay, more regulars than there are recreational players, that's for sure. So in this first hand, the cutoff makes it $30. We look down with pocket fives on the button and we flat call $30. Now the action is on the small blind and he bumps it up to $140. Some background here on the small blind. He is a very good player, been playing for years here at the 5-10 level at Hard Rock. So when it's back on us, the cutoff makes the fold. We decide to call. We're in position. We have about $2,500 behind. We can set mine and hopefully win a big pot if we do hit a 5. His 3-betting range from the small blind should mostly be pocket 10s plus some ace queen, ace jack, and ace king hands, and maybe some suited broadways. So if we can hit a 5 on maybe a king or an ace high board, we could win a very big pot here. Going heads up to the flop, which comes 9-7-5 rainbow. We hit bottom set here, very good for us, and our opponent bets out $150 into around $320, and I will give you guys some insight about what I was thinking. The player in the small blind is very aware of ranges, knowing that this board hits me a lot more than it should hit him when he 3-bets out of the small blind. He's also very disciplined in not paying people off as well. So when he bets 150, I just call, trying to basically trap, represent my hand as just one pair and let him keep betting. Turn card 4 of spades, and my opponent keeps betting. He bets $300, and this is when it gets a little funky. He would most likely be checking over pairs on this board on the turn because it helps me so much more than it helps him. So the fact that he's still betting is a little bit worrisome. In my opinion, he either has a very strong hand or he has a big draw such as ace king or ace queen with spades now. Given all this, I still want to trap against his overpairs, and I want to let him bluff off if he does have a hand like ace queen or ace king that he's basically drawing dead with. So we end up just making the call for $300, going heads up here to the river. Last card, deuce of hearts here, total brick. The small blind now leads for $900. So like I said before, very tight reg, not going to be putting much money in without a bad hand. I don't think he's ever doing this on a bluff. He's never betting this big with queens, kings, or aces. So he either has a straight, 2-pair, or a set, and given the fact that I don't think he can really ever have a straight here, he can also have pocket 9s and pocket 7s that he decided to 3-bet out of the small blind versus a cutoff open, which is very reasonable. So given the fact that he can have pocket 9s and pocket 7s and he's representing one of those big hands like that, we decide to just call the $900, and he shows us 8-6 of spades. He 3-bet pre-flop in the small blind with a suited connector and ended up flopping a straight versus our set. So he coolered us here. We ended up probably losing the minimum here. I think against another player, I would definitely be shoving all in on the turn or the river. All right, that was a pretty nasty cooler there, flopping a set versus a straight versus a reg there, but ended up losing the minimum I would expect. All right, so into this hand here, there is 3 limpers, and we have ace-king offsuit in the small blind. We bump it up to 80 bucks. The first limper calls, the second limper calls, and the third limper folds. So going 3 ways here, I think I could make it a little bit bigger, maybe 110 to 120, and these guys would call as well, so that's something to think about next time. The flop comes out 7, 8, 8, 2 hearts. So on this board, it's going to smash their limp calling ranges. So we decide to check. The first limper puts in a bet of $100. He's a pretty big action player, loves to bet his draws or basically anything. So he bets $100. The next to act player folds back on us. We're not going to give up ace high just yet. We make the call. So we're going heads up here to the turn, which is the 7 of clubs. So now the board is double paired. When I check to him, I expect him to be checking back most of his bluffing hands now. If he had a hand like deuces through pocket sixes, he's now counterfeit, so we're beating that hand as well. So he thinks for a little bit of time and puts in a bet. He ends up betting $250, so kind of a weird spot. He's representing only an 8 here. I would expect him to possibly check back most of his bluffs, but because he's repping so thin and he loves to put the pressure on, we're not going to give up our ace high just yet. We make the call for $250, going heads up here to the river. We're going to be calling down on most rivers here, depending on what it is, and it comes out the jack of hearts. So not the kind of card we want to call down on. The front door flush comes in, 9-10 as an open-ended straight draw comes in. Also his hands as jack 9 or jack 10 that he was bluffing with make a pair. So we check, looking to hopefully go check check or possibly check fold. He thinks for about 30 seconds and checks back. So we expect our ace king high to be good. So we show, and he shows 3 deuce of hearts. So he hit a flush there on the river. We made the right call on the flop and the turn, and he got lucky on the river. What can you do? On to the next hand. Not the best start of the day, but this one is a wild one. The cutoff limps, same player with the 3 deuce of hearts from the last hand, and now the small blind makes it $75. We wake up with pocket jacks in the big blind. If we 3-bet to like 200 or 250, then the cutoff, the action player, would most likely fold, and we want to be playing hands against him no matter if we're in or out of position. So we just flat 75, and now the cutoff calls 75 as well. So going 3 ways here to the flop. Dealer puts out 4-4 jack. We flop a boat here. All right, things might be looking a little better for us. The small blind thinks for a while and checks, which is not what we wanted. We decide to check, and the action player checks as well. After the flop checks through, the dealer puts out the 7 of hearts on the turn. Small blind checks again. We check to the action player, and he puts in a bet. He bets $175. Now the action is back on the small blind. He tanks for a little bit of time, and he calls 175. So this is turning out to be a great situation for us. Now we at least have somebody on the hook, so we're going to raise for value here, trying to make it look like a bluff. We throw in a purple chip and say raise, make it $500. The action player in the cutoff basically snap calls our bet, and the small blind folds. Last card here is the 10 of hearts, and I look over at my opponent, and he kind of perks up in his chair and looks at the board, so I really think he connected with this card. I'm guessing he had some kind of backdoor flush draw with the hearts. Now we have to figure out how much to bet. I have about $1,900 left in my stack. If I shove all in here, that would be a massive overbet and could possibly let him get away with some of his smaller flushes, and obviously I don't want that, so I settle on 8 black chips, $800 going into the middle, and now my opponent thinks for a while, goes into the tank, looks at me. About a minute goes by, and I'm obviously praying for a call. He keeps looking me up and down, and I'm trying not to give anything away. He then takes 3 pumpkins and puts them in the middle. So he ends up raising all in here, and I snap call. I show my pocket jacks, and he looks pretty frustrated. He shows queen 8 of hearts for a backdoor flush, and what a great river card for us. We ended up getting the full max double up here, so we are back to even on the session. All right, finally we win a big hand there. We are doing a little bit better. This next hand we're playing 6-handed here. I straddle on the button for 25. The big blind calls 25. Under the gun +1 raises to 100. The cutoff calls 100, and we look down at ace king offsuit here. So we're gonna bump this one up, 3-bet for sure. Normally I would go 3x in position, but because the cutoff called, I'm gonna go 4x plus a little bit more because the big blind called. So we raise up to $425 here. Big blind quickly folds, under the gun +1 thinks for a while and folds, cutoff folds. So we end up taking down about $230 here, uncontested with ace king, exactly what we wanted. We now get moved to the main game, automatic $25 straddle. So we're playing 5, 10, 25 now. We have a pretty big stack. We are on the button here with Jack 8 of diamonds, under the gun +1 limps for 25. We just over limped. This hand is pretty close to a raise or just a call on the button. Once somebody limps already, we don't really want to be isolated into 100 or 125 with this hand, given the stack sizes. So we just call, and the small blind and the straddler call. The dealer puts out Jack 8 deuce. We flop top 2 pair on a pretty wet and connected board. Now under the gun +1 player leads out for a $100 bet, so pretty large bet here. We want to raise to get value from his weaker jacks and also flush draws and straight draws. We raise it up to $325. The small blind player, now a recreational with about $2,000, calls $325. Back on under the gun +1, he thinks for a while and folds. So going heads up with the small blind to the turn. We see the 6 of hearts, and now the small blind player ends up checking. This card doesn't bring in any straights or flushes and probably won't give him any better 2 pairs than us as well, obviously. So we want to continue to bet. My guess is he either has a hand like ace jack or king jack or possibly a big draw. So we want to bet big, but not too big. We do want him to call. His equity is probably around 30 to 35%. We settle on a $400 bet into a $760 pot, and he doesn't think too long and makes the call. The river comes out a pretty good card for us. I think it is the ace of clubs. Best case scenario here, he has the ace-high flush draw with the ace of spades, and now he hit top pair. He could also have hit 2 pair with ace jack, but we can't be too scared of that. So we put in a bet of $500, about 1/3 pot, trying to get called by any ace or any jack. He doesn't really think and folds, which makes sense. He probably just had a big straight draw or flush draw, ended up missing there. So we ended up holding here with Jack 8 for 2 pair and win a $1,500 pot. We are picking up some momentum now. Next hand here, we wake up with black pocket kings in early position. We raise to $75. The cutoff, a recreational player calls, and the small blind, a 5-10 pro, and the straddler calls. So we're going 4 ways here to the flop. Board comes out Jack 10, 9, 2 spades, so we flop an overpair here, a gut shot to a queen for a straight, as well as a backdoor flush draw with the king of spades. This is a super wet and draw-heavy board. Our opponents can be smashing this board heavily with 2 pairs, straights, and possibly some sets. So given this board texture and the fact that we are multi-way, we end up checking this one back, and the cutoff checks as well, so we're going 4 ways here to the turn. We see the 4 of spades giving us the king-eye flush draw. The small blind leads out now for $175. The straddler thinks for a while and calls. One of the reasons for checking back the flop was to pot control for situations like this where we want to realize our equity and see the river, but we don't want to pay too big of a price. So we're going to call 175 and try to evaluate here on the river. The cutoff folds, so we're going 3 ways now to the 6 of diamonds, and now the small blind checks. Straddler thinks for about 20 seconds and checks as well. So now the action's on us, and we have a decision. Should we be value betting our pocket kings here on the river, or just checking down, trying to get to showdown? We decide to just check back here, and I am glad I did. The small blind rolls over king, queen of hearts, so he flopped a straight, and he bet there on the turn. We didn't get there on the river with our flush, and I guess he was trying to induce a bluff on the river, so glad I didn't bet. The check on the flop really saved us some money there on this hand. Alright guys, got another hand for you here. Early position calls 25. The big blind calls 25. We're in the straddle with pocket jacks. We're definitely going to raise this one up. We make it $150. The early position player calls $150. Big blind calls $150. So going 3 ways to the flop of 7, 4, deuce, 2 clubs. We do not have a club in our hand. We down bet to $150. Early position player thinks for a little bit of time and shoves all in for $1,500. Now the big blind tanks for a little bit and folds back on us. Here with pocket jacks, it's just a weird spot. This player has been pretty passive, doesn't like to bet really a lot, will call a lot of the time, but isn't super aggressive. So a lot of the time this is 2 pair, a set, or a huge combo draw that we're like 50-50 with. And this is a weird spot. I ended up letting it go. I tanked for a while. I told him I had an overpair, and he kind of said, whatever. Didn't tell us what we had, so we don't know if we were good or not. But in this spot, it's just not worth it. We're in for 300 bucks, and we have to call off a huge bet. And he most likely had a set there, but maybe he had pocket eights or pocket nines, but I think he had a big hand. So I think we made the right fold. On to the next hand. The most interesting hand of the night here comes out when the middle position player opens to $75, cutoff call 75, the button call 75. We look down in the straddle at ace king. So we want to be bumping this up 3-bet time. There's a lot of dead money in the pot. We have a premium hand, and we should be ahead of basically all of our opponent's ranges. So sizing for this 3-bet, we want to go 4x out of position plus 1 or 2x per caller. So we decided to go $400 here, a little bit smaller than I would have liked, but our opponent has around $2,300, so about 100 big blinds with the straddle. So a little backstory on this guy. Earlier, about 3 hours ago, he got 3-bet and he tanked pre-flop for about a minute and then called, and the hand ended up getting to showdown and he had pocket queens. So this time, I make it $400. He tanks for about 20 to 30 seconds and calls $400. The rest of the players end up folding. So what I think about that is I don't think he has a premium like queens, kings, or aces. I think he would be thinking more of a 4-bet or a jam with those hands. So I think he's more inclined to have 7s, 8s, 10s, and jacks. This pot is almost $1,000 going to the flop. An ace or a king would be great. I would love to take down this pot. We haven't been doing too great today. The dealer ends up putting out 9, 5, 4 rainbow, so we totally miss here, but we do have a range advantage on this board. Range advantage meaning that we can have all the aces, kings, and queens, and because he didn't 4-bet, he shouldn't be having many of those hands. He also should not have 4s or 5s, calling a $400 raise, so really the only hand we have to worry about is pocket 9s. My plan is to put max pressure on his 1-pair hands and using my range advantage to my advantage. So I check to him thinking that he'll probably put out a smaller sizing bet. And when he does, I'm going to jam all in over the top, trying to rep aces, kings, and queens. So we stick to this plan. We check. Our opponent bets 325, so pretty small bet. And we decide to shove all in $2,000 right in his face, trying to get him to fold hands like 10s, 8s, and possibly jacks. And now he starts to think. He is a tanker, that's for sure. He's in the tank for like 2 minutes. At the beginning, I thought he was actually going to fold. Then he starts looking back at his cards, and now I think he's more likely to call. So obviously we want to fold here, but if he calls, we'll run it twice, and maybe we can hit an ace or a king. After about 2 minutes, he decides to call. So he has $1,900 total. We're going to run it twice here. First board, 5 of clubs, 7 of diamonds. Totally miss on this one. Second board comes out 10 and 6, so we missed that board as well. We say we have ace high. He shows pocket 10, so couldn't get him to fold that overpair on the flop. Little unfortunate, but I don't mind my play. Trying to put max pressure. I could play aces and kings this exact same way, so hopefully he can think about this next time. When we do have a hand, he'll pay us off. We are back in this hand with pocket kings again. We make it 75 from early position. Under the gun plus 2 makes the call. Middle position player makes the call. Button makes the call. And the straddler call. So we're going 5 ways to the flop. I don't think this board can get any better. It comes out king 8-3. We flop top set. And it is looking pretty good. The only thing on this board is that it's super dry. There's no flush draws, no straight draws. We are 5 ways. We decide to check, trying to let our opponents catch up, hoping that someone will put in a bet, and the under the gun plus 2 player does. The same player who I tried to bluff with ace king earlier ends up putting in a bet. He puts out $150, and now the straddler makes a call for $150. We're just going to call here, trying to under-rep our hand, letting our opponents catch up with maybe 2 pair or trips. 3 ways to the queen of diamonds. We decide to lead on this card. We just tried to bluff this opponent earlier, and I don't think he's going to give me much credit. So now that we have the nuts, we're going to lead, put some money in this pot. We bet 375. We do not want to get this turn check through. He thinks for a little bit of time and calls 375. The straddler folds, and now going heads up here to the river. I put my opponent mostly on a king, such as king jack, king 10, king 9, possibly king queen. So I'm going to size up big on the river, which it comes out jack of diamonds. So we have the king of diamonds, don't have to be worried too much about a flush. We end up betting $1,200, trying to polarize our bet here, trying to get called by 2 pair, possibly a set. We just tried to bluff this guy, so hopefully he pays us off this time. He ends up folding. He thinks for a little bit of time. He says, why the bet so big? I don't say anything, and he folds, so we take down a decent pot here with pocket kings. So you know what is harder than playing poker? Trying to vlog on a Saturday night when it's windy outside. You can't film inside because too many crazy people and you can't take off your mask. So you're trying to find a good quiet place outside that is well lit, and it's impossible. I keep trying to find places that there's no wind and people just coming out everywhere and interrupting me, drunk people coming in, and it's pretty rough. Vlogger life is rough. All right, so we found a spot here, and this is basically the only place that I can talk and not get interrupted and you guys can hear me. It is my car, so we're here. All right, this hand here, a PLO player sits down, pretty action player, loves to gamble, sits down with about $600. He limps for 25. We have pocket kings next to act. We make it 100. The cutoff calls 100, button calls 100 back on the limper. He calls, so we're going 4 ways here, $400 in the pot. Flop comes out, deuce, queen, king, 2 clubs. So we flop top set here, running good, and it gets even better. The limper ends up jamming all in for $475. So pretty amazing spot here. Have to contain my excitement. Can't act too quick because I have 2 other players behind me. I want to try to get them potentially in there as well. I think just calling the 475 is fine. It's like an over pot size bet. So we call 475, and now it is back on the player who I tried to bluff earlier with ace king, and he goes into the tank. He's thinking for a while now, and he decides to do something I wasn't expecting. He goes all in for $2,200. We have the nuts here. It's back on us, and now we start to think about our options. No, I'm just kidding. We snap call, and I ask him, do you have a set? And he doesn't answer. So the PLO player says he only runs it once, so we decide that we're only gonna have to run it once. And the turn card, so the turn card comes out the 10 of diamonds, so not the best card. It brings in ace jack and jack 9 for gut shot straight draws. The river card is the 8 of diamonds. So the flush draw misses. We show our pocket kings. Both of our opponents muck their hands. We end up taking down a $7,500 pot here with pocket kings, running good, stacking 2 opponents at one time. It's around 1 in the morning, the game gets short and ends up breaking, so we rack up and book the win. Wow, what a crazy, crazy session there. We won and lost some of the biggest pots we have played at 5-10, that is for sure. Ended up getting stuck early, making a comeback, then losing some more again, and then won that huge pot with pocket kings at the end, which was awesome. We ended up in the game for $5,000, cashing out for $8,200, so a profit of $3,200, so great night here at the Hard Rock. Definitely can't ask for much more than that. If you guys like this video, make sure to like and subscribe. Coming out with new videos 1 to 2 times per week. All right, that's it for this one, guys. I'll see you.